Jay, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
For those of you who don't know Jay, Jay is the EVP and head of Core AI at Microsoft. And Jay also is pretty unique in that he was leading three big shifts so far. One with the rise of internet at Akamai, and the second one, the rise of social at Facebook, and now the rise of AI at Microsoft. And I had the pleasure of working with Jay for a very long time at Facebook, which is where I met and learned a lot from Jay. So today I'm really happy to have him here. And we have a lot of cool topics to talk about. We could probably talk for hours, but we're going to try and contain all of this to 30 minutes. Let me start with some of the background questions. Jay, you've led engineering at Meta, Facebook, for us all. And you ran the cloud security startup and now leading all of Microsoft's Core AI group. What thread has guided you in your career? Like, what pulled you into the AI leadership now, and what do you carry with you all along?
Yeah, I think it's easy to describe it looking backwards. I wouldn't say that there was no, I would say, like logic in it. I think for me, probably a couple things, and I've talked about this before. For me, it's like always trying to make sure wherever I am in my career that I'm on that steep part of the S curve and really trying to maximize the learning, right? And being uncomfortable, right? And really going after hard problems. And again, I wouldn't say that it was, oh, I had it all figured out. I can say now it all makes sense, and I can tell you an eloquent story today in front of you. But I think it's just this inherent kind of property I have, or this characteristic I have, that is always going after hard challenges, right? From trying to figure out how to help the world and help technology industry scaling the internet, or at Facebook we did social, we had to figure out this mobile thing, and then now all of us figuring out this AI thing. Hard scaling problems, maybe.
I think that's pretty good because I've seen you scale teams, I've seen you scale systems and businesses as well. What most people don't know here is all of the investments that you made at Facebook on what I call dev infra. So if you think about all the tools that were available at Facebook, the data tools especially, that everyone uses, like Gatekeeper, Deltoid, ODS, so many of those investments came from you. In fact, those tools were the inspiration for Statsig too. So we started the company because we thought those are all the amazing tools that Facebook had a huge leverage on, and then we could bring that out. What drove you? I mean, those are big investments. You must have had some kind of an insight into why you should go invest and bring all the best people to work on those.
I think it's actually a pretty simple reason. For me, it is all just about the pace and speed of learning. Kind of goes back to what I just talked about in terms of being on that steep part of the S curve. It's hard, right? It's like you don't know what you're doing half the time. There's new challenges, things are breaking all the time. And you're trying to not just change technology, you're trying to change maybe the ways you're working, you're trying to change your business model. Competitors are coming at you, or really, really building great products, etc. So when it came to being at Facebook from the early days till when I left in 2021, it was always about how do you keep fighting back the natural tendency of a big organization. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, more successful, bigger scale, lots more systems, lots more data, lots more customers, lots more consumers using our product. And the natural tendency is that that's all gravity's getting stronger and stronger and trying to pull you back and slow you down, right? And really we can talk, we can put posters on the wall, say, hey, move fast, and you can give those inspirational talks. But when it comes time for builders, and I use builders because I think more and more so, it's not just software engineers who are helping to build great products and build great businesses. I think there's a very big shift happening in organizations. But how do you keep trying to, in some ways, unlock or fight that tendency to slow down, right? I talk about this notion of a learning loop. So picture a circle. as you get more successful, as you get bigger as an organization, whether you move from 4 people to 14 people or 100 people to 10,000 people, that circle is getting larger. And as you get bigger with more people, more customers, more revenue, et cetera, you travel around that circle slower. And then you're learning slow, like you're just not learning as fast. And there's somebody else out there, some other competitor who's going to complete that learning loop faster than you are. And in the fullness of time, they will beat you. So for me, I remember from day one at Facebook till day end, whenever somebody asked me, new hire, intern, prospect, customer, Jay, what's your number one worry? You know, and they'd expect me to say, hey, uptime or making your budget or something like that. And I said, number one worry for 11 and a half years was slowing down. That's what always kept me up. And that really drove 2 things. One is huge investment in building an incredible team of engineers and builders to build these internal tools. And then the other part of it was really hammering and harnessing and evolving our culture. And those two kind of they're really connected, right? Because I think you can have like a great culture, but it's not going to last if you don't invest and think about great tools that empower your team. And sometimes you can buy this stuff. At some point, you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you have to make that investment. There's no free lunch here. You have to make that part of your culture, is like building these great tools that help you create, help you build, help you learn, help you experiment, help you operate things. And that's across the board, from recruiting tools to observability tools to, you know, build test tools. Statsig. I don't care, everything. Statsig, right.
Awesome. This kind of like ties back to what we opened the session with, which is the competitive advantage today is speed, but it's always been speed. So that brings me to our next question, which is a little bit controversial because I want to ask you, of all the values that you've seen before, lived through, what is your one favorite one?
Yeah, I mean, we had our values at Facebook, and I think, you know, lots has been talked about them. I think there was like 2 for me that were always top of mind. No surprise, move fast was always one that I related to. So no surprise there, right? And the neat thing about moves fast, and actually most of these values, companies who have written values for, and it can be your startups, right? The values I find most interesting are the ones that actually have inherent tension in them. They disagree with it. Like 2 people can talk about the value and actually look at it and have different takes from it, right? There's a lot of bland values out there, right? And don't be one of those companies, by the way. And like innovation is not a value to me, right? And so, you know, moving fast for us that we're at Facebook and other companies, like there's an inherent tension there, right? Because like you want to move fast, you know, and to be clear, the value at Facebook was not move fast and break things. That was just a poster. The actual value, the corporate value, is move fast. Now, move fast has just this tension in it because you inherently may end up breaking things because you're trying to experiment and try to learn things. That was not like a thing we did. It did not encourage recklessness. It encouraged experimenting and learning quickly, right? But there was other parts of the system where maybe we were deploying software. You know, when we joined, I think we were still doing the daily push, right? For the app server. So for the core kind of PHP code that became Hack, et cetera, we pushed once a day. Then we started spreading out engineering across the world, and we did it 3 times a day, right? And that got us from like a couple hundred engineers to a few thousand engineers. And then by the time I left, we were pushing continually across 30,000 engineers. So as we got bigger, we actually moved faster. That was a huge investment in the tech, but also in the culture, right? So move fast, I think, was always one that, no surprise, that I'm excited about. The other one I actually like and still like is just focus on impact. I think it just made it very clear, because I always talk about, you know, motion versus progress. And like that value of focus on impact, like cut through that and made it very clear that we have to measure things, we have to move metrics, you know, but not get stuck in metric, kind of the metric rabbit hole and do the wrong thing. So we have to have the perspective of like, do what's right for the business. So anyway, I think those are probably my 2 favorite from our time at Facebook.
Yeah, I remember that one where I joined Facebook in 2011 and I thought the company was absolutely crazy, shipping code every single day. And then 3 months later, Jay gets up in front of the whole company. He's like, we're going to ship every diff that we commit. I was like, this is bonkers. But it turned out great.
We can say that now.
Okay. Tying back now. So for those of you people in the audience that don't know, could you share more about your new role, the Core AI group, and what is the mission?
Yeah, so our focus area in Core AI. So Core AI, we created this team in January of this year. So I joined Microsoft at the end of last year, October of last year, spent a couple months trying to learn as much as I could across Microsoft. And then in January, we started the Core AI team. And the focus, the vision for the Core AI team is to empower every developer to shape the future with AI. Now, what a developer is today is changing, as we probably all see and feel and are experiencing. So the focus area really does encompass, I think, a broader class of what I'd say builders. And what we're tackling right now with the focus of this team is, one is to transform the entire software development lifecycle and to move out of just sort of, say, AI-assisted parts of the software development lifecycle to changing every phase of the software development lifecycle to be AI-driven or AI-powered. Now that sits on top of what I call the agent factory, or effectively a platform that allows these AI applications to be built, to be run, to be observed, to be secured. And then we also think about and build in security and trust from the start. And then we provide a flexible deployment model for any builder out there to be able to run these things in the cloud or be able to deploy and extend these applications into the edge. So think, a laptop or a phone or whatnot.
You've mentioned Agent Factory before, and you just mentioned that again. Now, from what I understand, providing tools for companies to build AI agents, so that turns into an Agent Factory now. Could you give me a little bit more detail about what you mean by that and how you're deploying it and how you think the future is going to be with agent factories?
Yeah, just a quick little bit of a fun story here. So I was chatting with Bill Gates earlier in the year. We were having a one-on-one, and I was telling him about this idea that I had for the agent factory, which I'll talk a little bit more about in terms of like what this series of technologies, this sort of new way of working, this set of new tools, platform, kind of protocols, open source, et cetera, kind of all come together and, one, help Microsoft build more of these agentic or AI applications, but provide kind of a third-party tool platform combination so any company out there could actually turn themselves into this agent factory. Well, Bill stopped me, I would say, a little bit through my exuberant definition of what I was excited about, and he's like, Jay, actually back in 1975, when we founded the company, that was 50 years ago, right? And he's like, I had this idea that Microsoft we're going to build a software factory. So we're going to get all the best, brightest software engineers out there, and we're just going to crank out all this amazing software. All of our competitors are building kind of point solutions by company, and what I wanted to do at Microsoft, Jay, was to build the software factory. So I was like, okay, cool, 50 years, I'm just 50 years late with the agent factory, right? So no, it was a really fun kind of, I thought, just dialogue with Bill. And so, what is that equivalent of, say, the software factory for today's day and age? AI factory, agent factory. But really what I want our team focused on is the old world of building software. I'd say it old world, but it's like really not that old. You think about the way we built software is you'd go out there, you talk to your customers, whether it be consumers or other businesses, you try to understand a business problem or an opportunity, you'd come back, you'd design a database schema to store some data, you'd go build some application, business logic code around it, and then stick it in some UX UI, right? That's sort of a deterministic way. There's a database, there's some storage, there's some app logic, business logic craft with some UI experience, right? Now, we're shifting into this new world where that whole paradigm, that all of that scaffolding, it's not even like it gets put on its head. It's like an entirely different universe. Because at the core is these LLMs, these models, right? And these things can think, they can plan, they can reason, they can interact with the real world tools, et cetera. And so what you have to build kind of below them, above them, to the left, right of them from a scaffolding perspective so that this next wave of applications can be built is an entirely different system, right? And that's really at the heart of what the Core AI team is trying to solve and provide, not only inside for our first-party customers at Microsoft, so think about the other products that Microsoft builds and scales. We want to build that engine, build that platform and tools for them, but also providing that to all of the customers out there in the world that Microsoft serves today and will in the future.
That's actually a really cool insight because I want to dig a little bit deeper into, you say Core AI unifies folks working on, developer AI platforms, as well as large enterprises. I am generally curious, like how do you align such companies, large organizations, small organizations, to actually ship at the speed of like what AI requires?
Yeah, so we have I'll just give you a couple of examples, right? And I think everybody's in probably different phases of diffusion or adoption of this, right? There are some companies out there that are still denying it and maybe thinking it's a fad. And then there's other companies that are way ahead of anybody in this room in terms of understanding what they can build with this technology. We had one customer we were working with, I think, earlier in the year, and this is around GitHub Copilot, and they had to do an overhaul to an application, their consumer application. And they came back, having done the analysis of what this feature or this work that needed to be done, they came back with an estimate of this thing taking 11 weeks. Right? This team needed to work on 11 weeks to basically make this set of improvements to their consumer application. And it's a brand that you would recognize. 11 weeks. Now, they use GitHub Copilot with a small, fast-moving team, incentivized to help them move fast, GitHub Copilot. They got it done in 5 weeks, right? And I was like, why can't my teams do this? Get done early. So I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive, right? And it's like, cool, they were able to use the power of this technology to get a project done in about half the time. Now, a month or two went by, and the same team actually came back to this eng manager and to the partner that we work with, and they're like, hey, actually, everything on our backlog is done. Said no engineering team ever, right? Yeah, but this team has actually drained their backlog because they were getting so capable with this technology, right? So that learning loop for them is going at an incredible fast pace, from like not knowing a ton to be able to drain their backlog, right? Now, I think that's just a great example in terms of a team that's like moving fast, learning. And what I talk about is like culturally, which I kind of refer to this as Camp 1 and Camp 2, and like where are you? And by the looks of it, I'm guessing most of you are in the latter bucket. But as we work with different organizations out there, I asked this question. I said, if you're working with this technology, which one do you relate to? When you use some AI system, whether it be Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever, is your reaction when you try to give it a problem, ask it a question, being like, wow, this thing is incredible, I'm amazed. You're like shocked and amazed as to what this thing helped you go do, answer, research, whatever it might be. That's Camp 1. Camp 2 is you're like, dang it, why can't you solve this for me yet? Like, you should be able to do this. Why are you not smart enough, right? And if you're in Camp 1, I encourage you to give it harder problems, to delegate more, to raise your ambition. If you're in Camp 2, you should really dig in and try to master the craft, like understand more about context engineering, understand the data, understand how to do more advanced things with the models, experiment with more models, understand fine-tuning, understand RL, keep going, right? Because it is very likely that these models are going to surprise you in a week or a month. And the pace of advancement is exponential, and we've got to stay and hug that line from a learning perspective as close to it, that as possible. Otherwise, if you're kind of like here, that's when things slow down, and that's when these teams, these organizations, these applications will just fall behind.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So tying this back to some of the cultural shifts you've seen, what do you think, from your experience, the next cultural shift that needs to happen in enterprises to successfully adopt AI? I mean, adoption of AI could be like a spectrum. So I'm talking about like successfully adopt AI and utilize it.
Yeah, I think so. Every organization is in a different phase of understanding this, right? And when I'm talking to customers, from small customer startups to large Fortune 500 customers, they're all struggling with this, right? Are we moving fast enough? Are we understanding this stuff quick enough? Are we like solving the right problems with this, right? And I'd say this year we're seeing a lot more movement of, I would say, mid-sized, larger organizations moving beyond, say, prototypes, kind of experimenting with this thing in chatbots and prototypes, into launching things into production, right? I was at a summit a couple weeks ago in Atlanta with the CIO of Coca-Cola, right? And I was amazed to the types of AI agent applications that were running in production for them. I was like stunned. I was like, wow, this is like, I did not expect it, right? And like the things that they were deploying, putting out there in mom and pop shops in Latin America, and things that they were doing to get better insight and helping these shops order and have the right inventory, price these things correctly. All of this stuff was pretty cool, right? And you think about that at the scale of Coca-Cola and what they were able to do with AI. But there is an organization that's putting a lot of sort of like shift in from a culture perspective, changing the way they work together, the incentives in the company. And they've been investing in doing a lot of prototypes. So this was the year it was like, hey, we got to get this stuff into production, right? We got to have this stuff in production. The thing that I also think is really important in the enterprises is to capture the ROI, because I think when we were doing chatbots, there was no ROI, right? And now, as we think about these like agents, we think about more advanced applications, AI applications, you have to start with like what that ROI is. And I think it is like entirely uninteresting to just have your ROI be around time saved. Now, it's very controversial for most people I talk to in the enterprises. You can start there, but it's not ambitious enough to really understand what AI can do for an organization. Time saved to me, is table stakes. It's really unlocking that next level of, I would say, focus time and creativity in an organization, and being able to build differently, be able to personalize applications to your users, being able to solve, I'd say, harder problems as an organization from a research, creativity, a product development, a strategy perspective. So that's kind of what we talk about with the customers is like, hey, time save, dollar save, fine, uninteresting. What are you going to do to like shape the future of your company, top line growth?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because time saved is like the table stakes, and when I look at like paradigm shifts like this, you kind of like really want to look at like value generation in the future. Now, speaking of future, looking 3 to 5 years from now, what do you think will separate enterprises that thrive with AI from those that fall behind?
Probably the thing that I'm most curious to see, and again, I'm not somebody who's can see the future, so I think 3 years is a very long time to make any proclamations about it in this current day and age. But what I am curious about, and it's maybe more of answering your question with a question, is my belief is that the organizations that are going to, let's say the enterprise, right, not companies that are going to be founded next year or the year after. So think about your larger enterprises that are, hundreds, billions, tens of billions of dollars of revenue. I think the ones that are going to be leading the world will be the ones that figure out the new way of working inside their companies. And in many ways, what's going to need to happen is there's in some ways, like a combination or a collapse of all of the specialization and functions that exist in a large organization. And the ones that navigate that and don't resist that sort of lean into that transformation of ways of working across all of these different departments, functions, specializations, I think are the ones that are going to realize that top line kind of value creation, value generation they're going to be on a steeper curve. That's my hypothesis. So maybe in 3 years when I'm back here, we
should bring you back.
See.
Okay, so you've like experience running small companies, large companies. You've transitioned between them very successfully. If you were to look back and see if there's any inflection points that you can share with the audience, what would that be in terms of like, your career and leadership? What set you to succeed, or what's that inflection point?
I'd say it's hard to say there's like one inflection point. I mean, I think there's been multiple. I always like when you're in these moments where there may be a crisis or like there's sort of a hard challenge business-wise, strategy-wise, team-wise, world-wise. Those are the moments that you're like really questioning whether you're doing anything right as a leader. And then many years later, you kind of look back and you're like, well, I got some things right, I got some things wrong, and then I'm better for it later, right? I would say, just because is a bit, maybe a little bit personal, but just because we just crossed the anniversary of it. But one thing that still stands out in my mind is what happened when I was at Akamai. And, I joined Akamai and it was like the dot-com boom. Some of you might actually remember that here. Most of you don't, like you were probably you were younger than me at that time. So, dot-com boom, obviously just kind of crazy time. There's parallels to what we're living in right now. So, it's kind of an interesting a phenomena or just time. But, I was at Akamai, early career, rocket ship, huge IPO, all of this stuff. And then the dot-com bust happened, right? And sort of all of this unwinding of all this dot-com company stuff, pets.com and all of these things. And, on 9/11, Danny Lewin, one of our co-founders, and he was just an absolute force of nature, brilliant computer scientist, mathematician, but phenomenal in terms of people, culture, and business person. And, we're scaling, building this company, et cetera, and then 9/11, Danny was in one of the planes that went into the trade towers, right? So we lost Danny. And it was a really surreal moment because Danny, I just remember that morning, but losing Danny and all of us wondering if he was really on the plane, not on the plane, then, finding out that he was on the plane. And then the entire internet is just getting hammered because everybody is turning to the internet trying to figure out what's happened, right? And there was this you didn't even have time to kind of process and grieve about Danny because all of these websites were calling Akamai to be on Akamai service to stay up and running. And if you weren't using Akamai, your websites crashed. If you were using Akamai, your website stayed up and running, right? So for me, that was just one of those moments where it was listen, losing Danny, the dot-com bust, the company had to do a bunch of downsizing and efficiency work and whatnot. And I'd say looking back at that time, sorry for the long answer, I grew up a lot as a professional and as a leader, and I really learned a lot from that time. And it was multiple years. It wasn't just one day, but because it just, we just crossed 9/11, I thought of that story.
Thanks for sharing that personal story. We are short on time. I do have to ask one question.
By the way, sorry, this is another part of the story. Fun, but not fun. We IPO'd at $120 a share, but we listed at 26. So the first day we closed at 120. We went up to $345 a share, about 34 billion market cap. And then we went to 56 cents. A year later. Company's still around, doing well.
Nice. Well, that brings me to the next question.
Where are we in that curve?
How many founders or aspirational founders are in the audience? Quite a few. This question is for you all. So for the aspirational founders in this group, what would your advice be for them undergoing this massive paradigm shift from a technical and also cultural point of view?
just keep pushing, keep learning. I'd say the one thing that's really interesting as I work with and I talk to a lot of startups, a lot of founders, is you have to dial in your story. There's so many companies out there that all sound the same. And so really you can come in and be like, I got this post-trained LLM, blah, 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 RAG, blah, blah, blah. Wake me up later, I don't care. Really, what is that story of why you care and what the problem is? So that storytelling, that story making, because you're all like brilliant technologists, you'll know all the latest, greatest stuff, you'll build something amazing. But if you can't punch through the noise with a compelling and amazing story that grounds your technology, you're not going to get anywhere. So don't lose sight of this story that you have as a founder that got you to start the company. Make sure everybody that you work with understands that, extends it, amplifies it, and keep repeating it till you're blue in the face, and then repeat it some more. So don't forget the story.
Thank you so much, Jay. Please give it up for Jay Parikh.